I did something very different from what the other people in my family had done. I have two older brothers, and they both married girls who had also grown up in Bloomsburg, and they had known their families since my parents were children. And then I just called them up on the telephone once and told them that I was going to be living with someone that they'd met once. And they didn't really know Peter. They just knew his name.
Well, your father cried.
Yeah, right. Right. It's interesting that all the time he was crying about this because this was a terrible, immoral thing. He was having an affair with someone that who he later married, and he wasn't telling my mother about it.
Barbecue chickens at $1.99. Shoppers in the produce department, we have bananas at 18 cents a pound, new cabbage at 9 cents a pound. Idaho potatoes, 5 pounds, 89 cents.
I did find the failure in starting with my parents, the hypocrisies in their lives, you know, the little lies, the infidelities, the lack of spiritual strength, the dependence on material wealth, the bitterness. My mother went and stole my father's bronze medal from World War II. That was the meanest thing she could do. So my father smashed all her antiques and crystals, you know, and then after that, it went from there and got worse. Well, my father's remarried for the third time, and because his divorce with my mother was so bitter, I haven't seen him in 14, 15 years. I can't really judge where he's at. My mother hasn't grown or changed in wisdom for all her years, and she and I have always had a very tough relationship because she just doesn't understand. She doesn't understand me. And left home when I was about 18, when my parents divorced. Everything was thrown into chaos, and I was going to college at Columbia, and soon dropped out there because I was overwhelmed, I think, by all the problems. My parents divorcing, living on my own, my first love affair. School was tougher than I thought it was going to be. Not having really the right motivation. And finally went to work, back into school, back to work, back into school, and really went through a period of questioning my values, trying to find the meaning in life and not doing too well at all. Well, I remember about the first thing that really excited me was Kennedy. When President Kennedy started talking about doing something for your society, you know, do something for your country instead of worrying about what your country can do for you. You know, it appealed to something inside of me, you know, the better side of me. And of course I was terribly, terribly, I don't know what the word is. I was really distraught when he was assassinated. In fact, the whole series of assassinations of Martin Luther King, of Robert Kennedy, really woke me up to politics, and it woke me up to what a threat these seeming heroes could be to our society. I couldn't understand it. Around that time, I was living with somebody. I lived with quite a few guys before them. We talked about marriage, and I remember he really felt it was just a formality in this day and age, that typical argument that you just sign a piece of paper and that the real marriage is the agreement between you and the spirit, and the paper isn't going to hold you together. Obviously, with all the divorces that we'd seen and the divorce rate increasing all the time, you know, what did it matter whether you went to the altar or not? What mattered was how how you felt about each other. And if it didn't work, you know, it didn't work. At least you didn't have to go through all that rigmarole of going to divorce court and what have you. Well, we debated that one, and I finally prevailed with the argument, well, if we have children, it doesn't just make it unnecessarily awkward if you're not legally married. And so we got married and moved to the Cape. Decided that there was something very insidious about city life, a beginning consciousness that the city in some way was going to eat us up or destroy us. So we moved to Cape Cod, which is like heaven by comparison. And interestingly, it took me about 6 months to slow down, to really hear with my ears and see with my eyes and smell with my nose. I found that the city life had really dulled my senses. And a growing awareness that there definitely was a God, that the whole miracle of life was just far too great to explain by spontaneous combustion or parthenogenesis or whatever it is that they taught us in school. We lived there running a resort for a while, and then wanted a family, and when the family didn't come, we decided to adopt. And it was kind of a strange twist of fate, because when I was younger, I had gone through a couple of abortions before they were legal, although both of them were legal. But at the time, it seemed unthinkable to keep a child. It seemed impossible, really. It would be a nuisance to the family, and how could I work and support myself? And the father involved was not ready, and so on and so forth. So I had felt bad about having the abortions, you know. And it seemed a twist of fate that now that I was married, and now that we could have children, I couldn't have children. So we decided to adopt. My husband was sterile, and as long as we're going to adopt, why not take children who were less desirable to most people? We were kind of idealistic. So we adopted interracial children. Well, after about 5-6 years, my husband got involved with another woman, and I didn't know about it. And, there were things before that, the friction between us. When I finally just really confronted him about this other relationship, there was no great scene. So I thought it would hurt less if we kept everything out in the open. You know, if he was interested in someone, well, maybe there was a way that he could love me and love them too. You know, instead of having to throw a relationship entirely out, you could keep what was good with me and pursue whatever was good with someone else. And I accepted that.
We make choices. We don't necessarily respond to the information that's been given to us as children. And when we run across a new situation, generally speaking, we act on however we feel that day. Not quite situation ethics, but more really trying to make a conscious choice of what's going to make me happy. And the end result is it works out pretty good. You know, if I'm hanging out in a bar and I run into a lady and I want to go out and get married, I do it. But there are also ethics attached to our relationship, and the way I do it is that I say, hey, listen, at midnight, I turn into a pumpkin, you know. If you want me between now and midnight, that's okay. But at midnight, I go home to Janet, and that's the way it is.
Well, that's because I work until midnight.
Yeah, right.
Initially, my attitude is, okay, Kenny, if you find somebody else that you like better, that's cool. I want to know about it. I don't want to not know about it and all of a sudden find out
Yeah.
that you're out with somebody else. I want to know about it up front. Let's at least have honesty. If we can't have anything else, let's at least try to eliminate the backdoor relationship. Let's at least try to keep everything up front.
I have a girlfriend uptown, and I see her between 4 and 12:30. Sometimes a little later. I go to sleep maybe, and I don't get home on time. But she has a girlfriend, and the girlfriend had been talking to her about going to bed with me, and so this other girl talked to me about it. I said, "Yeah, dandy. Hey, that'd be great. Let's do it." You know. And finally, one night, I ran into the girl in a bar that I hang out in, and threesomes are very, very difficult. The interplay is incredible. Absolute personal interplay is incredible.
Not to mention the logistics.
Oh, the that's a. We had a live-in threesome for a while. We had another woman living with us, and making love with us and everything else.
But that's too when we were into really partying.
Yeah,
We were both going out.
Yeah.
We'd go out together and party and play. We'd
Yeah.
get into threesomes, foursomes, whatever. And then
Your
we got
birthday?
Oh, don't talk about that.
We talked about it quite a bit, and we felt that there were a lot of things about marriage that didn't really have any meaning for us. But ultimately, we felt that it was still an important thing to do, that it signified something that we were really committed to each other, and the idea of making a life together and having a family.
Neighbors around here were very relieved that we had gotten married.
I had been thinking of getting out of the city for about 3 years before I met Ann. We met on a train coming back from a peace march in Washington. And initially, my idea was simply that I did not like the ugliness and noise and dirt of the city, and I wanted to have some place outside of it that I could at least go to. Then, after a couple of years of kind of desultory looking around for a place, I started meeting people at an encounter community who had some similar ideas, and I got interested in ideas of communal living. It seemed to make sense economically and in terms of my own personality.
We bought it one January, and the next September, one of the couples said that they didn't want to be involved in it anymore. They really were not getting very much out of sharing, and they felt that they couldn't hold up their end financially. So the Klingies and Peter and I bought their share from them. So then it was two couples.
But there were lots of problems. I mean, it wasn't just a financial thing with the first couple. I mean, it seemed like whenever there was a personality problem, it was tremendously intensified by the fact that we were sharing the farm. It became weighted very much because there was so, I don't know, I guess there was so much at stake. It wasn't like you were just with some people for a weekend or something like that. You know, we owned all this thing. We had this big future of, you know, what's going to happen among all the families and how's it going to work out. And so anytime there was a conflict, it was very threatening, and it became a big, heavy scene. In fact, there were many things that happened while we were all together that were utterly fantastic and that have never happened before or since or happened anywhere else, like having 30 people eat here, and people, we have pictures of people doing, Ann leading a
snake
dance up the road here with little children and grown-ups, and sitting on the lawn are 70-year-old people and a nun, and it's just a mixture of people doing things that you would never see.
It was
anywhere
always
else.
very exciting, and there was always something like that happening. We did a lot to get ready. I mean, we read the Mother Earth News when we lived in the
Right.
city.
I was
with
very
such
inspired.
zeal
Yes.
that it's unbelievable now. And we got every organic gardening book we could think of. As a matter of fact, the first year we planted a garden with the Encyclopedia of Organic Gardening open at the end of each row so that we could follow the directions.
So we had one encyclopedia, and we would move
Right,
it from-
right.
We didn't
We'd
have
move it down.
an encyclopedia at the end of each
But
page.
we don't do that anymore. We do things very differently now from what we did.
So there were other relationships. Then he brought home this girl who was really very nice. And, you know, we were getting terribly civilized now. Like, he would suggest that maybe we all sleep together, you know. And when it turned out that that she had a problem with frigidity, he suggested to me very playfully, well, maybe you could help her, you know. And like, I didn't believe my ears at first, you know. I wasn't sure he was suggesting what I thought he was. And of course, any lesbian experiences or lesbian thoughts had never really been a part of my life. I've been totally protected from that. And so I was not very quick to pick up on that suggestion. I kind of laughed it off. And what happened in about 6 months is that this girl was a really lovely person, and I grew to really love her. So we kind of went through the stage of finding that just being friends, we felt so much more, you know, and since there seemed to be the license in my house, you know, to express ourselves beyond that, you know, we got into a physical relationship. And in all this time, I was, in a sense, still lost. I didn't know what moralities and what rules there were anymore. I didn't know which rules were the good rules. You know, you try to be good and you're well-intentioned and you have, you know, you're an idealist, but what are the true ideals? You know, what is truth? You know, if you're honest with each other and you hurt each other, you know, if you have affairs out in the open, is that any better than having affairs in secret, you know? And how do you remain true to each other? You know, how do you keep a solid family? How do you remain close? How do you get truth in the government? How do you get honesty in the government? You vote for the right guy, you think's the right guy, and he doesn't win. Or you vote for the right guy and he wins and he gets killed. And that was really what had me all set for a witness from someone young who had been through the drug scene and the divorce scene and everything else, who said, hey, you know what? God has some rules, you know, and they're good rules. It's all in the Bible, and it may be old, but it's relevant to today.
Oh, God, we thank you tonight that you're not willing that any should perish, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. Oh, God.
So I started working in a massage parlor and started making a lot of money. At first, you know, I liked it as far as the money that I was making. I can't say that I didn't, you know, like it because I did at first. I liked the feeling of being able to walk down the street and buy anything that I wanted, because for so long I had lived with just the clothes that were on my back and things. And when I was 15, if I got involved in hippie movement pretty heavily, because I was influenced by the outward philosophy, you know, love and peace and all that. And for about 5 years, I guess, like I hitchhiked to California and I lived up in the mountains in a tree house. I lived in communes and I got involved in the women's movement, and I got into yoga, and I just, I was trying everything to find God. I was looking for it in sort of a mystical experience like Eastern religions and stuff. I had led a really, what I felt was an unmaterialistic life. Finally, when I was 22, I was just at the end of my rope. I was really unhappy, and I thought, well, maybe money is the answer. It's the only thing I could see. I felt it's got to be the way, I worked in 2 different places, and I eventually got into prostitution, which most of the girls did. Some of the places, it was really more of a personal thing. It was left up to the girl what to do, And that's how you made all your money. You didn't really make any money by just doing body rubs, It was all the extra things that you did.
So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. But I say, have they not heard? Yes, verily, their sound went unto all the earth, and their words unto the ends of the world. But I say, did not Israel know? First Moses said, I will provoke you to jealousy by them that are no people. That's from the old days. Yeah, I used to read Ms., but I got tired of reading Ms., and it's the best I can do for bookends, but I feel very self-conscious sometimes when I see them up there. I think I would have to wallpaper them or something. But I was in a position before my former marriage, where I had to make decisions, and I had to take care of all the finances and what have you. I wasn't comfortable doing them. I could do them, but I didn't feel right doing them. And it certainly affected the respect that I had for my husband. I didn't want to feel that I was stronger than him or smarter than him. Although maybe many times I was, I just don't really think a woman should be involved in that province. I don't think by nature that God created woman with an aggressive nature, that she balances off the strength and the aggressiveness in a man with a gentleness, and a compassion and a grace that only a woman really has. And that God made man and woman to put them together to form a complete whole, like a broken eggshell being put back together.
I still like the animals in the garden, but right at this time, I would just much rather concentrate on doing film work and maybe later on get back into having animals and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest changes. When we first came here, careers were way down on the ladder of priorities. It did not seem so important what we were doing, that in anything that you could call a career, but it was just how we were living, kind of the quality of our life, and that we could get vegetables from our garden instead of the grocery store. Those things were important, and now it's just like a whole reverse. Getting enough work, feeling productive.
But on the other hand, we don't want to move back to New York. And also, I don't think I have ever gotten over the disappointment of the communal experience not working. It still seems to me like it was a hell of a good idea, and there ought to be some way of having it work. And I really feel bad about that. We did try for a while after we split up with the Klingies to find other people, but we were never able to. We were never able to find anybody else who seemed to have the same values and have a realistic idea about how to go about doing it.